This is an article, a somewhat now notorious article for those who are old enough to remember it, which was published in March of 2003 by David Frum. David Frum at the time was somebody who I believe was one of the main speechwriters for George W. Bush, who was then the president. And this is something that he wrote about people on the right who were opposed to the war in Iraq, and who had larger questions about the greater so-called war on terror. I'm just going to skip around a little. You can read it yourself. It's all online. It's still online to see. But Frum writes, from the very beginning of the war on terror, there has been dissent. And as the war has proceeded to Iraq, the dissent has grown more radical and more vociferous. Perhaps that is to be expected, but here's what could never have been seen. Some of the leading figures in the anti-war movement call themselves conservatives. They're exerting influence. When Richard Pearl, God, holy I remember that creature. When Richard Pearl appeared on Meet the Press, it figures that someone like Frum would be palsy with him. Appeared on Meet the Press on February 23rd. Tim Russert, oh yeah, remember Tim Russert, the one who asked Bush and John Kerry both about being in Skull and Bones, and then mysteriously died of a heart attack soon afterwards. Kind of ballsy for someone in the mainstream media. Tim Russert asked him, "Can you assure American viewers that we're in this situation against Saddam Hussein and his removal for American security interests? What would be the link in terms of Israel?" Pearl rebutted the allegation. But what a grand war for the anti-war conservatives that Russert felt he had to air it. Yeah. Yeah. Terrible that people should want to make sure that if a nation is getting involved in a war, that it really does involve defending the nation itself and not defending some other nation that is actually geographically much closer to the nation that is being invaded. That nation being Israel. But Frum discusses this as though it were just so totally out of line for him to even say such a thing. You know some of the names of some of the anti-war conservatives: Patrick Buchanan, Robert Novak. Robert Novak's been mostly forgotten, but Patrick Buchanan still is known. A legend, in my mind. Others are not: Llewellyn Rockwell, Samuel Francis, Thomas Fleming, Scott McConnell, Justin Raimondo, yes, R.I.P. Joe Sobran, also R.I.P., one of my favorite writers. Charlie Reese, blah, blah, blah. Reads off some others. The anti-war conservatives aren't satisfied merely to question the wisdom of an Iraq war. Questions are perfectly reasonable. This is so disingenuous here. Indeed valuable. It's fine to ask questions, is what he's saying. This is kind of like the extreme Zionists who say, look, it's fine to question Israel. It's fine to we're not against, we don't think that Israel is beyond reproach or anything. We just call you anti-Semitic if you ever criticize anything that Israel ever does. But no, that's not what we're about. It's the same. This is the same thing same way this comes across here. Yeah, the anti-war conservatives have gone far, far beyond the advocacy of alternative strategies. Okay, you can read more of this. I don't want to get too in the weeds here. With something that's over 20 years old. But I'm going to just draw a comparison in a second to something much more contemporary. So, Pat Buchanan said, 9/11 was a direct consequence of the United States meddling in an area of the world where we do not belong and where we are not wanted. We were attacked because we were on Saudi sacred soil, and we were so-called repressing the Iraqis and supporting Israel and all the rest of it. Okay. So he was saying you have to see it in a wider context, and you can't do that. Of course, I don't think Pat Buchanan was radical enough on 9/11, but he seems to think it was actually an authentic attack and not a false flag, which is anyway. I don't want, like I said, those are more weeds to get into here than that I want to avoid. So this article goes on a bit, and I just want to get to the end of it because the final paragraph is a banger of sorts. Okay. War is a great clarifier. It forces people to take sides. The paleo-conservatives have chosen, and the rest of us must choose too. In a time of danger, they have turned their backs on their country. Now we must turn our backs on them. This is a call for the purging of the paleo-conservatives, those on the right who are skeptical of the war on terror and especially skeptical of the invasion of Iraq. So that's in March of 2003. Now, fast forward to October 31st, 2025. This is an article that's published in First Things magazine. I used to subscribe to First Things. They have put out some worthwhile stuff from time to time. It's a Christian conservative, really, I would say, unfortunately, neoconservative journal. As I said, a mixed bag, a hodgepodge. But this is an article that they put out recently. That's part of that hodgepodge. False Patriots by Lee L. Leibowitz. I mean, it's like never mind. It's well, maybe he's just he's proud of who he is and not going to hide it. That's fine, I guess. It's just so in your face. It's just funny. It's so in your face. November 5th, 2024 was one of the most joyous days of my life. This is the day that Trump got elected. Trump's re-election felt more than a mere electoral victory. It was a profound affirmation of American values. What a difference. So it was morning in America once again. What a difference a year makes. Not that the president is to blame. On the contrary, in the 10 months in office, so he says some things about how he thinks Trump's doing a great job. But rather than applaud the president's accomplishments, however, many former supporters have turned on him. And not only on him, but more alarmingly, on America itself, which they see as riddled with terrible defects and controlled by evil forces. Sound familiar? Like this is how they're framing the enemies of the right from within the right. The paleo-conservatives, the far right, are enemies of true conservatism. This is how this article is also phrasing things. So consider Nick Fuentes. He's an uber influential podcaster and Holocaust revisionist hobbyist. Hobbyist. I don't know. I can't speak to the revisionism part. I haven't heard Nick Fuentes' take on the numbers. But I guess if it's any figure less than 6 million even, then that's revisionism, right? I guess. That's that's pretty much. I don't mean to be glib, but that's pretty much the way it's talked about. So anyhow, hobbyist, like that's his hobby. It's a strange way of putting it. Sort of a way of trying to make him seem like an unserious person. He's this is the revisionism of the Holocaust is his hobby. He's just a hobbyist. Caused a stir in 2022 for dining with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, but changed his tune before the 2024 election, voicing concerns that Trump's administration will be staffed by Jews and gays. Now he calls Trump a weird guy who is not right in the head and accuses him of shilling for Israel. In its account of the October 7th attacks, which Fuentes has repeatedly suggested were a false flag operation designed to justify the so-called genocide in Gaza. Now, the thing is, Mr. Leibowitz, the author of this article, that Charlie Kirk was on the record also questioning that exact same thing, or also saying, was there a stand down order on October 7th? So if you're against Fuentes in this respect, you should, in the interest of intellectual honesty, you should say, and unfortunately, Charlie Kirk also voiced this same belief. But you don't say that because you want to frame Charlie Kirk as being, with the good conservatives and against the evil far right, alt right, as this article is attempting to do. Crazy hokum, you say, an outlier of no significance. They give you Candace Owens. So she said Trump was the savior of the free world, but now says that he was a chronic disappointment. Speculates that an Israeli plot lies behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You're free to dismiss Owens too. You're free to argue that 2 or 4 or 8 loud pundits on X do not a movement make. Perhaps that's true, but then there's Tucker Carlson. Okay. For full disclosure, I used to like Carlson. Period. A lot. Period. So something went terribly wrong early, and I'm skipping around. I'll give you the link if you want to read the whole thing. Early in 2024, Carlson traveled to Russia, where he famously wandered through the streets of Moscow, exclaiming that such cleanliness and order could never be attained in miserable old America. Well, I mean, yeah. He sat down for a softball interview with Vladimir Putin. Yeah, Tucker Carlson went to Russia and talked to Vladimir Putin without getting the okay from, the establishment, the State Department, the CIA, whoever else, usually okays these kinds of interviews, because people from the West have interviewed Vladimir Putin before, but they've always, been sure to ask certain kinds of questions, and the idea is to portray Putin in a certain kind of way, so that he can be shown to be a threat, and an evil Russian imperialist by the neoconservative, neoliberal oriented media. But as you remember, it's been a little while now. It's almost been forgotten. But Carlson's interview didn't go that way. He talked at length with Putin, and there was no effort to try to portray him in a particular way. Although he did lobby for the release of somebody who the Russians captured and said was a CIA agent. So he did do certain things that you would think they would give him credit for, but because he was there, not asking the right questions and not being a team player, it was portrayed as Tucker Carlson being a traitor to the American foreign policy cause. So again, the sort that you have this. You can say there's nothing wrong with airing new and controversial views of history. Same kind of thing we heard from Fromm, right? You can say, of course, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. We're not saying you can't ask questions. We're not saying you have to unquestioningly just believe our ideology and our agenda and shut up about it. And we're not saying that. But on the other hand, that's exactly what we're saying. But consider the tendency of Carlson's thought, unperturbed by Russia, China, or any of America's actual foes and rivals. Carlson spent a considerable amount of airtime in 2025 obsessing over Israel and the Jews. People like Ben Shapiro, he said, if Tucker Carlson has ever said the Jews in his life, I will. I don't know what I'll do. I'll eat a rubber boot. Tucker Carlson's not the kind of person who goes around talking about the Jews. He doesn't do that. But people like Ben Shapiro, he said, were focused on a conflict in a foreign policy as their own country becomes dangerously unstable. I'm shocked by how little they care about the country. Okay. So he goes on and on. He wasn't, and then he was critical of Ted Cruz for saying, we've got to support Israel first, Israel all the way. He said that's stupid, that's ridiculous. Where do you get this from? Cruz said it was what we learned in Sunday school, is it? Pretty much. In July, Carlson mused at a public event about the Jewish billionaire Bill Ackman, asking out loud how Ackman had acquired his wealth. Okay, how dare you? Again, we're not against asking questions, but he actually asked this powerful and influential person with a with a certain agenda that we want to, that we're in support of. He actually asked him probing questions about how he obtained his wealth, and that shows that he's a bad guy. This is vile stuff. But my concern is not for the Jews, right, Leibovitz? Your name is Leibovitz, but your concern is not for the Jews. It's not for Jews. Please. We've withstood far worse than insinuations. Yeah, okay. So you're just it's no out of no concern for Israel or for neoconservative Israeli friendly agenda. It's all because you are selflessly supporting other people and other causes, right? So this article, like Fromm's article, talks about how this group of miscreants on the far right, Fuentes, Owens, Carlson, These are all people who are daring to go against the what he's framing as the conservative, the reasonable conservative mainstream majority, instead of just being, and it basically all revolves around Israel and whether you support what they're doing in Gaza or not. And if you're not sure who the good guys were in World War II, that's based on, again, intellectually dishonest portrayal of things. Carlson had on somebody who did a podcast about the German side in World War II. Just sort of looking at that, at the other side, just to have that perspective, not because he was a pro-Nazi, not because he was sympathetic to National Socialism, but that was how it got framed, and that's how this dishonest author is framing it here. If you believe Moscow is preferable to Miami, Moscow probably is preferable to Miami, and I'm not ashamed to say it. Call me unpatriotic if you want, but I bet that Moscow would be a better. I bet I'd have a better time in Moscow, and have less. There probably be less of a chance of me getting mugged if I went to Moscow than if I went down to Miami. If you're kind to a head of state who calls America the Great Satan, and fawn over a dictator who tells you that America is a puppet state run by the CIA, well, America is a puppet state run by the CIA, so and I don't know who the dictator. What dictator is he fawning over, or what head of state is calling America the Great Satan that he's kind to? I don't know. Maybe I missed that, but this is obviously a reference to Putin, the dictator who tells you that America is a puppet state run by the CIA. Well, and then he finishes by saying, well, you are many things. You're not a conservative, not an American patriot, and certainly not a legitimate part of any movement that wishes to preserve the great energy of MAGA. Trump seems to understand all this. Here's hoping his would-be successors follow his lead before it's too late. Same call for a purge, same identical to Frum's article from 2003 in its general tone, saying there are these people. Back then, it was paleo conservatives. Now it's the far right or the alt right. But that's just a question of semantics. But isn't it interesting how certain things don't change? Unpatriotic conservatives, false patriots. It's the same thing. It's the establishment, neoconservative, hyper-Zionist, pro-war in the Middle East, military-industrial complex people, and they're framing themselves as the real conservatives, and those who are right-wing but who are anti-war and against some of the more foolish aspects of American foreign policy. They are being read the Riot Act and told that they must be purged. The difference is that now, in 2025, I would say there is much less energy. There are more. These, in 2003, when Frum wrote this, Unpatriotic Conservatives, there was a big movement because it was post 9/11. Everybody was still angry about that. Everybody wanted to invade the world and kill the Arabs. That was sort of the attitude at the time. That's just the way people were feeling at that time because of what happened on 9/11 and what they thought, who they thought did 9/11. And today, the movement. Things are moving in a different kind of direction, and there's more of a. I would say there's more of a desperation to writers like Liel Leibovitz than there was to David Frum in 2023. They're swimming against the tide right now, and there's a kind of desperation in their demands, and yet they still have the chutzpah to make these demands. That's what never changes.